Hi again, and thanks for joining today. Today's session is all about unpacking the recent JobTrainer package and the opportunities for RTOs. My name is Trevor Fairweather. I'm the General Manager of Student Management Systems at ReadyTech. And for those of you who may not be aware of ReadyTech, ReadyTech is the home of Australia's most used student management systems and skill profiling tools, VetTrack, JR+, and My Profiling. I'm excited to be joined by Matthew Dale from educonomy. Matthew is the founder of educonomy and COO of Audit Express and has worked in numerous roles within RTOs and across the vet sector for many, many years. Matthew recently wrote a great piece that unpacked the JobTrainer package, what it is and where he sees the opportunity in vet. So we thought today we'd team up and bring more information to you, our clients and the sector at large. There's so much happening in vet at the moment, and it is fitting that we're talking to you about this today during National Skills Week. We're genuinely excited about the opportunity of how we can work together to help upskill, reskill the workers not only impacted by COVID-19, but those who are looking to get into the training system and hopefully help get our economy back on track. Like most webinars, we've got the Q&A panel today, so please pop through any questions throughout the session and we'll aim to answer them throughout the session. So on that note, enough from me, let's get into it and I'll hand over to Matthew.
Thanks so much for having me on today, Trevor. And thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join in and to join the discussion on JobTrainer. I hope that you'll all take something from today's discussion. So as Trevor's already said, my name is Matthew Dale. I am the founder of both Audit Express and educonomy, which is where you may know me from. My LinkedIn details are on the right-hand side of the screen there. If we're not already connected, I welcome you to reach out and connect with me via LinkedIn. And before I really do kick off, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands that we work on today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that may be participating in the webinar. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to recognise and celebrate the diversity of the Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connection to the lands and waters that we're residing upon during these really challenging times. So there's a few parts to what I would like to present to you today. Looking at the different opportunities for funding, not limited to only JobTrainer, but also really taking a look at how you can tap into other sources of federal funding, state funding and local funding, both through government funding and also through fee-for-service opportunities. So let's kick off on JobTrainer. Well, before we do that, perhaps what we can do is actually look at the various forms of government funding that are available for businesses at the moment. JobKeeper is an obvious one that you may be aware of. JobSeeker, if you are unfortunate and have been made unemployed by the current situation. And obviously JobTrainer, which is what we will focus on. So in order to unpack JobTrainer, I think it is really important to sort of understand a bit of the context of what's happening here. There is a larger sort of policy reform that is underway at the moment, and that's timely. Hasn't really been brought about due to COVID. Essentially, the National Partnership Agreement was due for renewal in any case, and that is where all of the state governments essentially sign on to a national partnership that lasts over a duration of a number of years, and that is where the federal government contribute an amount of funding. Generally 50%, it's co-funded by the states and the federal government. So what we have up on the screen here is a breakdown of how we can expect the JobTrainer funded places to be broken down state by state. So there is an additional 340,700 training places that are going to be funded at just over the $2,000 mark per learner. And the breakdown is here. So New South Wales will be sitting just shy of 110,000, which is representative of around 32% of the total funded places, followed by Victoria and then on to Queensland, and the other states and territories follow on from there. Now, this will really see us through until next year, and we'll really see more announcements coming along really over the next couple of days, as soon as the next couple of days, if not in the next week. We'll start to see more announcements being made both federally and at a state level about how this will be rolled out and how it will be implemented. What we do know is that these courses will be targeted at job seekers. They will be targeted at young people that have recently left secondary school, or young people that are disengaged and needing to get into that career. And the way in which this will all be funded is through the current mechanisms that we have in place. So that is through the state governments and in the various states and territories. If you're in New South Wales, that would be through the New South Wales funding arrangements. If you're in Victoria, that would be through the Skills First or the Higher Education and Skills Group through the standard portals that are in place. And in the first instance, that is going to be only to those providers that have already got a contract allocation in place. So if you're not currently allocated a contract, or if you don't currently hold a contract with a state or territory government, unfortunately, in this first round of JobTrainer, you're not going to be able to apply for that. And there's a few reasons, but the obvious one is logistically, there is so much work going on at the moment, it's just not possible or feasible for state governments to be opening up a new round of tenders at this time. But that doesn't mean that there's going to be no opportunity for you. What it does mean is you'll just need to look at what other types of opportunity are out there. And we'll cover some of those as well in this presentation. So what JobTrainer and the following on, the new partnership that will really see us through for the next 5 or so years is focused on doing is achieving a more consistent approach to the funding and the delivery of funding in VET. That looks at the courses that will be funded and the amount of funding that which they receive. At the moment, there's such a huge difference between various states and territories as to how much a course is going to be funded at. If you look at nursing, for example, the amount that it receives funding for in Queensland varies very differently to Victoria, and again, very differently to Western Australia. And it can be in some cases double the amount of funding that's received. So what we're looking at doing here, or what the government's looking at doing here, is really finding a balance and finding what amount the course should be funded at, how much does it cost to deliver, and we should start to see a lot more consistency in that from state to state, and hopefully they strike the right balance with that. I do want to touch on onshore delivery to international students. You will have seen a whole range of stories in the media around the hardship that students have received at this time due to COVID. We, in many states and territories, can't be doing face-to-face delivery, particularly here in Victoria. And what that's led to, obviously, is the borders being closed is an obvious one. And that's really cut off the ability to bring more students onshore, or for students to be able to come here and study. We are starting to see some really positive news out of South Australia, also out of the Northern Territory, around pilot programs for students to be able to come back as early as 2021. The numbers that we're seeing with this are really insignificant in the first instance. This is not going to sort of save or really help your business recover. 300 students is a very small amount. Although it is a really positive step in the right direction, it's going to be quite some time, perhaps 2023, maybe even 2024, before we start to see a full recovery or steps towards a full recovery of students being able to return to study. And the students' expectation and what study looks like at that point in time is also likely to be quite different as well. So watch this space, but you may also want to be looking at ways in which you can deliver training to students that are located offshore as well. Hopefully it's not going to be the case that the goose that lays the golden egg has dried up, or that the egg is broken, but we really do need to be making sure that at a provider level that you are supporting the students you've already got that are here onshore. It's really quite distressing to see a lot of the challenges that are being faced by students. A lot are going hungry. I won't go too much into that, but I do think that at a provider level and at a government level, there is a lot more we can be doing to support those students that are already here on board studying in Australia. I have taken a bit of a deep dive. I know we've got a large number of people joining us today from Victoria, but I did want to just really take a dive into looking at what funding is available at a state level. Obviously, the opportunities that are up on the screen at the moment relate to Victoria, but there are equally similar opportunities that exist in each state and territory, and you should be looking into those. So in Victoria, we've seen more announcements around free TAFE, which is great if you're a TAFE institute, not so great if you are a private training organisation. There is the Working for Victoria initiative, which is really looking at aligning Victorians that are currently unemployed to jobs in areas of growth. Again, TAFE are a really integral and key part of that. The state government have made it really clear from the minute that they were elected that TAFE would be their priority, and they have delivered on their word with that. It's not to stop you as individual providers going out to large infrastructure projects or to organisations that are employing and looking at where you can meet their training needs, because there are so many training needs out there at the minute. So again, there is a support for the sector initiative whereby there were grants that were issued to TAFEs, Learn Locals and AIMS providers. They didn't need to apply for those. They were just really told what they would be receiving. Again, RTOs excluded from that. Where there is support available, if you are based in Victoria, is through the Emergency Relief for International Students scheme. If you're not already aware of that and you are a CRICOS provider, I would really encourage you to take a look at that. There is different support available for TAFE and private RTOs, but really good to see that there is support mechanisms there in place. Again, if you're in another state, not in Victoria, I would encourage you, go back, take a look at the state government website and continue to monitor that. Don't assume that you're going to be sent an email or a notification to advise that there is a new pocket of funding or new opportunity that's been made available. You should also look at joining into your state government and the federal government tender website, because there are tenders being released weekly for various opportunities that are out there at the moment that aren't necessarily being publicly announced, but they are out there through tender portals. So we've got business support packages. Again, we've used the Victorian example, but there are business support packages at a state level in all other states. In Victoria, there is a business support fund, so $10,000 for your business if you are metro-based and employing staff, or $5,000 if you are regional. And there's a whole lot of other mechanisms of support that have been provided there. If we jump into local, and I think this is really where a lot of organisations haven't needed to tap into for many years now, and there is a lot of opportunity for training organisations, particularly if you are supporting services related industries, hospitality, retail, anything that is forward facing with clients. This current COVID business grant has closed. However, I do expect that these types of grants will reopen as we start to see the restrictions on trading lifted, and as government and local councils need to support businesses to rebuild after the COVID situation. So $5,000 grants for online and e-commerce activities, but you'll note the second bullet point here is $2,000 for training and professional development. There are many grants and tenders that are out there for you to be able to deliver both accredited and non-accredited training to meet the needs of industry at this time. And I guess that's really the expectation that I'd like to set. We don't know the full detail, and we won't know for some time until the federal government have worked with the new National Skills Commissioner to identify what those priority qualifications and priority jobs are, and until the state governments really begin to unpack and define how much they're going to be paying for that. So it still could be some months before we see a full rollout of additional funding through JobTrainer. And in any case, it will only be available in the first instance in many states to providers that are already eligible for funding. So if you sit outside of that pocket and you've joined in today hoping to find that JobTrainer is going to be this new wonderful solution, while it may be a solution, it's not going to be a silver bullet. It won't be a total solution. And finding other additional pockets of funding and business grants through City of Melbourne or City of Sydney or City of Brisbane may be one really good opportunity where you can deliver a mix of accredited and non-accredited training. So we are in challenging times. It doesn't mean that there's not a whole lot of opportunity out there right now. If we look into the crystal ball at what the future is likely to hold, what I would like to point to is some research that gets released every year by SHA, and this excludes China data. So no Chinese enrollments are listed with this data set. And what this data looks at are the top 5 MOOC providers from the last year. So if we look at the 2019 data, at the top, we've got Coursera sitting at 45 million. And the list of the top 5 also include edX, Udacity, FutureLearn, and Swayam. if Coursera and FutureLearn don't already sit on your competitor analysis, I'd be questioning you as to why you're not looking at non-accredited training providers and the amount and the volume of providers that are really starting to enter the Australian market, and how much of a market share they are actually taking. I would expect that in 2020, given the COVID situation, that MOOC providers will see their numbers of online delivery double in size or come pretty close to. Sitting at about the mid-year point, some of the players in this space that I work with and that I'm in close contact with had kind of indicated that they'd already exceeded their 2019 figures by June this year. So with more people being online, more people working from home, there is a lot more accredited and non-accredited training happening online. There is a threat here, there's a risk to you, but there's also a huge opportunity for you to be able to take your courses online. And that really takes me to my next point, which is all around micro-credentials and digital badging. We do know from the JobTrainer announcement and the recent review of the AQF that government are now at the point that they're finally willing to acknowledge and define and fund micro-credentials, which is fantastic. We don't know the full detail of that yet, whether it will be limited to training package skill sets or whether or not they will, all states will include micro-credentials. And if so, whether or not that will be limited to training package or accredited micro-credentials, or if they will extend that to product or platform micro-credentials such as Microsoft training or Adobe training if you're wanting to learn how to use a particular system, and then looking at whether or not non-accredited micro-credentials would be included. That is a bit of an unknown at the moment, but one thing is certain: industry have already shifted their thoughts and their preferred method of delivery to more innovative and more rapid modes of delivery. And the uptake of micro-credentials has been phenomenal over the past couple of years. And it's great to see both higher education providers and vet providers also shift towards this space. So if you're not already working towards micro-credentials and thinking about what your organization can do in this space, the time to do that really is now. And I've pulled together a bit of a case study today, which has been out in the media this week. And this was reported in The Age, and it's a case study that's looking at micro-credentials being used in practice. And it was with Simmons Homes. And I first saw this one pop up on LinkedIn, and the Age article came shortly after. So what we've got here is a micro-credential that's been, or a badge that's been issued in relation to emotional intelligence, an advanced leadership emotional intelligence badge. And I clicked through that one to sort of take a look at where that link would take me. And this one has been issued through Credly, and we can verify that one using the Acclaim platform. So really all I've done is click on the hyperlink that's been included in this LinkedIn post. And where that's taken me is right through to the Acclaim page. And most badging platforms have some form of being able to verify the skills that are sitting behind that digital badge and what the earning criteria are. So by clicking on the verify button at the top right-hand side, it ran the reports in the back end. It was able to verify when that badge was issued, who it was issued by, that would be the RTO, the badging platform that it was issued on, who it was issued to, and then when it was accepted and last verified. So really, I think this is where we're going to start to see micro-credentials really playing a very powerful role in industries such as aged care, early childhood, and many levels of education where there are things that need to be verified. There are skills that need to be verified, or particular job roles that may be accredited or licensed. And there is a really powerful role that badges could play, and I hope to play over the coming years. And look, micro-credentials really could allow for rapid transition of the redundant workforce of the employees that are really starting to emerge in industries. And those employees that have been made redundant or have been fired through this whole COVID crisis are valid, and their skills are still valid. And through the use of micro-credentials to verify skills, we could be really figuring out where those skill sets could align to in new and emerging areas of skill shortage. We saw some great examples of this here in Victoria with the collapse of the automotive industry, and with production line workers we saw from the Geelong region, production line workers being redeployed into, through Deakin University. We saw them being going through a micro-credential process to verify their skills and being redeployed into the medical or into the hospital space, and they were sterilizing medical equipment. So there are some really good alignment of skills between the high quality function of job roles in a process manufacturing line and the high quality function in the sterilization of medical equipment. And there was something like an 85% alignment of skills and only a 15% difference of training that was needing to be delivered. So from government's perspective, there's a huge saving in not needing to deliver training and where skills are already existent. But from a provider level, there is a new product that you could potentially be working with that could really rapidly be retraining and reskilling and redeploying the displaced workforce that's out there at the minute. So if we get the balance right, I guess the question is, what could it mean for our industry and for our economy? And the answer to that, in my mind, is that we really might be able to put Australia back on the map as being a global leader in the delivery of vet. I believe in the past decade, as a sector and as policy leaders, I think our government have at times been a bit complacent. I think that certain parts and pockets of our sector have been underfunded and not given the focus and the energy and the effort that they were needed. And other countries have really started to take over. But COVID has really rebalanced a lot of parts of the globe, a lot of the economy as well. And certainly throughout Southeast Asia, throughout America, throughout Europe, all parts of the globe and all economies are suffering right now. So any solution that we can come up with as a sector to being able to train and reskill is really a huge opportunity right now. So we've covered a fair bit of territory here, but I would like to give a bit of a point in a direction. If you are wanting some really in-depth analysis on JobTrainer, more than we're able to cover today, I would like to point you to a podcast that's been released recently by Clarefield, which goes into a whole lot of detail. And I'm happy to share a link up on the screen. If we're not already connected, by all means, please do connect with me up on LinkedIn. And with that, I might stop the sharing and open up to questions if we can. And perhaps while we just go through some of these, the only other thing that I probably didn't go into a huge amount of detail on is that the federal government are very much shifting their interest, and they've made it quite clear that they are interested in really extending out the vet student loans and the opportunities around vet student loans. We're expecting opening for applications perhaps to open up around September. So if you're not already a vet student loans provider, that may be an area that you do want to look at as well in the funding sense.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthew. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. The first one's from Sam in regards to micro credentials and whether they include blockchain technology.
Thanks, Sam. That's a really good question. Yes, so I guess with micro-credentials, it's probably really important that we differentiate micro-credentials from digital badges. And I guess that's probably a 1 hour kind of webinar in its own right. We might need to look at putting something out on that. But put simply, if we look at micro-credentials as a mode or an approach of delivering training, very much in the same way that we offer qualifications, we offer training package skill sets, we offer short courses, we offer training that's accredited and non-accredited. They're types of training programs. Digital badges are the means of issuing the credential of the training that's been attained or the skill that's been demonstrated. It's actually the badging side that is on the blockchain typically, and then it really comes down to which platform that you choose to go with. There are a plethora of digital badging platforms out there. Some are verified on the blockchain or verify the skills and the credentials that have been issued on the blockchain. Others perhaps don't. What's really important when you're selecting a badging platform is that you look at your tech stack in your organization. So which platforms you're already using, which student management system, which learning management system. And it's important that you choose a badging platform that's going to work in well with that. And not just limited to LMS or SMS, it really kind of extends a lot further than that. Your email system, your video conferencing system, your CRM, looking at the way that platforms integrate is really important if you're wanting it to be optimized and working to its best capacity.
Fantastic. Another question from Sarah. Just any thoughts regarding opportunities for foundation skills providers?
Yeah, great question. So look, certainly the federal government have put it out there that they are wanting to provide further funding for foundation providers. Again, yet to see detail, and the devil is always in the detail. I do think that there will be a fair bit more funding available. And again, I would be, if you're a provider that's operating in that foundation skills space, while we have a lot of the workforce either working from home, having been made redundant, or having had their jobs put on hold, we know where Australia sits in the OECD, and we know that we do rank quite low in terms of language literacy and numeracy as an adult workforce. There is a huge opportunity there at the moment, and I think that you should be looking at additional opportunities for funding through grants, through tenders, and through contacting your local state government to explore what other opportunities may exist. Because at the moment, we've really just put up the general pools of funding that are put out to tender for the sector. There are different pockets of funding that exist generally through community services for funding that kind of stuff.
Great, Matthew. And just on funding, Bill's just asked a question in terms of funding is from the federal government through the states or directly to RTOs. If you could clarify, that'd be...
Yeah, good question. And I do have an infographic that could probably explain this really quite well. If we look at the funding that's currently out there, so if you receive Skills First funding or Smart and Skilled funding or Certificate 3 guarantee funding, that funding is co-contribution. So it is funded partially by the federal government, and it's also funded by the state government. But what's important is that it's administered by the state government. And with JobTrainer, although it will be half funded by the federal government pay that money to the state government, and then the state government administer that funding. And they will be administering that funding to their providers that are already contracted. So if you hold a Skills First contract here in Victoria, that would be the mechanism that you would be receiving that federal JobTrainer funding through.
Great. Another question from around funding from Carmel. Do you anticipate the states will change their funding policies and arrangements to get more consistency nationally once the new national agreements is in place? And would it make it so much easier for RTOs who have agreements across multiple states?
Yeah, very good question, Carmel. Yes, I do. If you haven't already read the MOU that's been signed off on, I'm happy to try and open up a link and to share that through the chat thread, or we can perhaps post it up later today. In the MOU that's been signed off on by all the states and territories, and Western Australia and Victoria have both now signed off. So very late last week, it was all signed off and agreed to. The intent behind that is very much around achieving consistency between the states. And in any case, next year, the states are due to renew their current funding arrangements for the next 5 to 7 years. So I do expect that there will be more harmony between states. There will still be differences between states, but there will be more consistency. I believe the consistency will be more around eligibility criteria, types of qualifications that are funded, and a more heavy focus on training school leavers to make sure that we can really engage school leavers once they've finished up at school, whether they're finishing at year 10, 11 or 12. Really anyone under the age of 24, it's priority for the government to be able to engage those school leavers and to really get them onto a pathway to a career. And there's a number of policy reasons that the federal government would want to be doing that we don't really need to go into today. But the second part of that question, would it make it easier? Yeah, if I look back to my previous roles out in the sector, if I look to our clients at the moment through Audit Express, where we're auditing their funding contracts around the country, absolutely. The biggest challenge at the moment is trying to find a consistent training plan or a consistent enrollment form if you've got contracts in each state and territory. And I guess the hope is that this would address a lot of those challenges that we've all been trying to see addressed for the past decade.
Oh, great. Thanks, Matt. Kylie's just asking, how do I get my RTO's qualifications on the list for JobTrainer?
Yeah, very good question. Kylie, I'm not quite sure where you're based at the moment, but if you are based in Victoria, you might want to try to participate in the Macklem Review if you haven't already contributed or submitted anything for that. The National Skills Commissioner and the National Careers Institute would be also a really great place to be looking. I'm not sure exactly what qualification that you've offered, but you may also want to look at going through your peak body. So if you were in the early childhood space, you might go to the early childhood, although most early childhood qualifications are already funded. But if there's a peak body or an industry representative organization, that would also be a good way to go through. They may be able to lobby. And failing that, never underestimate the power of writing a letter to your local member of parliament, to the minister, and perhaps even to the Prime Minister's office. And perhaps to the treasurer as well. As a citizen and as a vote payer, you can do that. As a local resident, you can do that. And as a business owner or somebody working in a business, you can also do that. When you write a letter, generally you're going to get a response. It may take some time, but the letter will always be read and you will generally get a response. So it's a really good way of making the needs of your business made aware.
And Matt, in a similar kind of train of thought, what do you think some of the targeted skills will likely be? As a question from Kath.
Yeah, great question and good segue into it. Look, absolutely around the health and care related industries, which have always been quite a transient workforce for a number of reasons. So look, disability, community services, community support, aged care, early childhood, all of these health and care related industries will absolutely be a priority as we come out of this situation. Transport and logistics will be huge. Manufacturing, I really do think that we will start to see a real peak in manufacturing, not just here in Australia, but we're already starting to see it if you follow American policy. And if you follow, around the world, both America and throughout Europe, because transport has been so much more challenging and, shipping ports around the country have been also shut down. Import, export becomes very challenging. So parts of manufacturing that we haven't seen for decades here in Australia, including, sewing and textiles and footwear manufacturing, these kind of industries, I really do think that we'll start to see a lot more of. And when we have more manufacturing, we'll certainly see more logistics. So I think they're the obvious ones, and that's a pretty good start.
No, great. And a couple more questions around funding. Do you think the New South Wales Smart Skills program will be replaced by JobTrainer, or will JobTrainer be an extra option for training?
Yeah, great question. So I think look at JobTrainer as not a stopgap, but an interim support that's been put in place by the federal government. So this is additional funding. It is an additional 340,000 odd training places to really see us through the next 12 to 18 months. And next year, we are expecting to see new training partnership arrangements. And that's the MOU that's been signed, is the future the future arrangements that will be put in place. So that's where we'll see more consistency under that arrangement. Claire Field has certainly gone into a huge amount of detail in her podcast. If you're wanting more detail on that one specifically, it's so much more than we would be able to cover in today's webinar.
And similarly, Matt, from Heather, they have a Victorian funding contract, but that doesn't automatically mean that the courses on scope that they have will be part of the initiative, does it?
Look, it's a really good question. If you are already a Victorian provider, I would expect that you would be, and the qualifications that you're referring to are already on your funded scope. I would expect that you would be included as being part of that. Worth keeping your finger on the pulse. I've certainly heard through certain parts of the sector that in some instances in Victoria, the government will seek to have TAFE deliver the training opportunities. And I don't believe that is the intent of the MOU agreement. And I don't think it's the intent of the JobTrainer announcement either. Contestability is certainly a big part of what the federal government has been trying to push and is trying to see take place in the sector. So if you are a private provider, I think it is really important to keep your finger on the pulse and look at what funding is being announced. And if it is only TAFE that are being included and you think that you're offering a quality product and that you are representing a particular industry and that your training is meeting an industry need, I would be trying to work quite closely with the government to make sure that the opportunity is extended to you as well.
Fantastic. And just to switch over to micro-credentials, question from Rebecca. Can you make up your own micro-credential or do they already exist?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there is no formal definition. Currently, there's no formal definition in the AQF. In the AQF review, there was a recommendation that the Deakin definition, as I would refer to it, it's a piece of work or a piece of research by Professor Beverly Oliver, who was a professor at Deakin University. There's a piece of research that was put together by her, and that's the definition that's been included in the recommendation. If it's okay, Trevor, are you happy for me to share an infographic on my screen? Is that?
Yeah, no worries. I'll just stop sharing.
I'll quickly pull an infographic up on the screen, and this one can be downloaded online. So the definition of micro-credentials is that they are a short form credential. Now, my definition is that it may or may not be accredited, but in the definition provided in the AQF review, it is that it could either be additional to a formal qualification, alternative to a formal qualification, complementary to a formal qualification, or a component of a formal qualification. So they're the four broad categories that have been provided. That infographic you'll be able to find on my LinkedIn, on the educonomy LinkedIn page, but we can try and get a copy of that sent out with the slides if you like. What I would say is that there is no current formal definition. The providers that are working in this space have set up their own framework of what micro-credentials mean to their respective organization, and how they will use micro-credentials and digital badges across their organization. And that's a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment in supporting providers with that strategy piece around identifying which key qualifications would lend themselves or work well with micro-credentials. It is really important that thought and consideration are put into the governance and the quality assurance to make sure that there's rigor behind what you're offering. But I guess to answer your question, you can create your own micro-credentials. It's really important you give it the same level of effort and the same level of quality assurance and compliance that you would any formal qualification or standalone unit. We need to make sure that quality is at the center of what's being delivered here, because if the sector trips over itself and there is some bad news or some poor quality that ends up in the news on this, more than a decade of good work and hard efforts could very quickly be undone. And that's the last thing that we really want to see. And that probably leads into another question that I've seen up on the screen, whether or not ASQA will regulate micro-credentials. It is a great question. If the credentials are accredited, absolutely. ASQA would be regulating all accredited training. But there is nothing stopping you from offering micro-credentials in your organization at the moment. And it really comes down to a learning design, and it's an approach to learning design and taking a scaffolded approach to learning design and a more curriculum-based approach to the way that you design and deliver your training programs. And that's, I think that's probably a root challenge that the sector is going to struggle with for some time. It's not covered in the Certificate for Training and Assessment. It's not covered in the Diploma of Training and Assessment, how to work with micro-credentials or how to take a scaffolded approach to learning design or a curriculum approach at point as well. So these are things that the sector is going to need to, to deal with. In your organizations, you can be supporting your trainers and yourselves at the moment to be doing professional development in this space. And there's nothing stopping you right now from investing the time into setting up a framework for both micro-credentials and looking at use cases for digital badges for both training and also other things such as staff awards or other things that you may want to recognize.
Great, thanks, Matt. And maybe one final question just on micro-credentials. How does a micro-credential differ from a skill set?
Yeah, very good question. So if we look at skill sets in their own right, the formal term is training package skill sets. And look, a micro-credential may be a skill set. You could deliver a skill set as a micro-credential. A micro-credential is different in that you are able to deliver accredited training or non-accredited training, and you are able to set up the parameters of what the outcomes and the measurable, what the deliverable outcomes of that credential would be. And micro-credentials are typically set up and driven towards meeting a particular need of an organization, a particular need of an employer, or a particular need of a job role. They're very focused on what they do seek to achieve. And because they are so focused and agile, you are able to rapidly work with them to deliver rapid training solutions. You can go to market very quickly with this, whereas a training package skill set sits within a training package. We know that it can take up to 5 years to develop or update an existing training package. And the only other point that I would probably point to with training package skill sets, there was a great piece of research released by the NCVER last November. And what we know about training package skill sets is that the uptake has been incredibly poor. The top 10 training package skill sets account for something like 63% of all delivery in 2018. 10 training package skill sets accounted for the majority of delivery. And on the other end of the scale, something like 86% of all training package skill sets, that was about 1,100 of them, had no enrollments or activity at all. So the majority of skill sets that are out there have no activity or enrollments, which really raises the question, why is that the case? But more so, why is industry not engaging, and why providers are not really looking to these as solutions? If I was to put on my policy or my policy analysis hat, I think at the core of this is a real fundamental issue with training packages and the structure of training packages, how they're developed, how they're managed, how they're created. Again, more than we can probably go into in today's discussion, but I don't think that by simply funding training package skill sets that we will see a huge increase or a huge outcome or an increase in quality or outcomes in that space. We need to shift more than training package skill sets. And we need to really empower providers to be able to work with micro-credentials, to be able to build them in a way that meets the needs of particular cohorts of learners, particular employers and particular industries. And we really need to be able to unlock the ability to work with industry and digital platforms such as, the suite of Microsoft training, the suite of IBM training that is not linked or aligned to a particular unit of competency. I still question why we've got units of competency on how to work with Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel when all of that training is put out there by Microsoft free of charge. Is there still a need for training in this space? Absolutely. But I think that's the opportunity that we've got with micro-credentials to be able to curate training programs that meet a particular need and might encompass some Microsoft training, but can deliver above and beyond that. The other thing is the non-accredited space. And when you look at, augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, emerging industries where training packages don't exist, I don't think that there's really a use case for creating more training packages for new and emerging industries that are moving at a fast pace. And I think that's the opportunity where if we can set the right parameters and get the quality metrics right to make sure that we've got good governance, good quality assurance, we should be able to work with those new and emerging industries to be able to create credentials that meet and address their particular needs. So I'm hoping that's where we'll get to. Whether or not all of those items on the wish list will be ticked off, probably not, but there's an opportunity for providers to be able to work with micro-credentials now to do most of that. That's without the government making any further changes. Industry have already got funds put aside and they're already happy to put money on the table to pay fee for service for quality training. So you really need to get out there and work closer with your industry stakeholders and get your systems in place and set up in your own organizations to be able to work with this.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Matthew, for answering all those questions. So just conscious of time, everyone. So just a quick couple of things before we wrap up for today. So just quickly, how do you keep across everything that's happening with JobTrainer and other sort of funding and compliance related news? So just quickly at ReadyTech, we've established the ReadyTech Education Products Standards Committee, which we call REPS. This is a group of individuals that work on behalf of our 1,400 plus clients, and we're really dedicated to excellence in Australian tertiary education compliance. So we work with the regulators, state training authorities, and our goal is to foster best practice approaches around compliance that hopefully eases the compliance burden, but also helps maintain quality that helps really underpin your success. So for any sort of future updates around JobTrainer and things that are happening in the compliance and sort of funding areas, please jump onto our ReadyTech Reps website. You can sign up there for updates and keep across what's happening. And finally, Matthew's obviously talked a lot about micro-credentials and how your organisation can get started with micro-credentials and digital credentials. So just to help you get started, we've created a digital credentials playbook. It's essentially a step-by-step guide, and I think one of the individuals posted a link to this in the chat before. Really designed to help you get started with digital credentials and micro-credentials for your organisation. So you can download that at the link on screen. And finally, that concludes the session for today. Really hope you found it valuable and that there's some really key insights and takeaways. A massive thank you to Matthew for sharing his insights on JobTrainer, but then more importantly, the opportunity for the sector. As I said before, we'll continue to post information and updates as they become available. I think we were chatting earlier, Matt, and you know we expect even some information coming out as late as this afternoon. Yeah, please sort of keep in touch, and we'll make sure we get information out to you as quickly as possible. Sign up to register on the ReadyTech Reps page. And we'll make sure we get information out to you quickly. So, yeah, thanks again for joining. Big thank you to Matthew. Have a great rest of the day. Cheers, everyone.